are joining us live from Munyunyu, where we are celebrating 20 years of DefendDefenders. We are here with human rights defenders from across Africa who have joined us for this celebration. And now we will be having a panel discussion, and thank you to our viewers who are joining us. Our panel is entitled Standing Strong, Reimagining Safety and Solidarity for Human Rights Defenders in Shifting Global Ecosystems. And we have our panelists in the room, and I am going to invite them to come and join us to the stage. I will start off with Mary Lolo, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. She monitors and reports on challenges and threats that are faced by human rights defenders globally. Her mandate focuses on raising awareness, advocating for stronger protection frameworks, and engaging with states to ensure the safety and recognition of human rights defenders. Mary Lolo took up the mandate of Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders on 1st May 2020, following the Human Rights Council Resolution 43/115. She is currently an adjunct professor of business and human rights in the Center for Social Innovation, School of Business at Trinity College, Dublin. She is a member of the advisory board of the School of Business, and she also worked extensively on the situation of human rights defenders as a founding member of Frontline Defenders. Mary Lolo was previously the director of the Irish section of Amnesty International from 1988 to 2000, and she became a board member in 1975 and was elected chair from 1983 to 1987. Mary Lolo has been known to be very passionate about human rights defenders, and she is here with us this morning. Please join us in welcoming her to the stage. Welcome, Mary. I also have the opportunity to introduce Gina Romero, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Gina leads global efforts to promote and protect the rights of peaceful assembly and association, enabling rights that underpin freedom of expression, participation, protest, and organization. Her mandate seeks to address restrictions on civic space and strengthen accountability worldwide. Prior to her appointment, she led several initiatives for the promotion and defense of democracy and rule of law. She is one of the founders and served for nearly 10 years as the executive director of the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy. In this position, she also served as the secretariat of the civil society pillar of the Community of Democracies. In these capacities, she has had direct relation with multiple stakeholders in 19 countries in the American continent and at least 35 in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Let us welcome Gina Romero. I also welcome Marcel Akpovo, who is the United Nations Office of the High Commission on Human Rights, Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, and representative to the African Union. He is a Benin national with over 32 years of international experience as a human rights lawyer, rule of law, conflict, peace, and security specialist. Prior to his current appointment, Marcel worked with the African Union, the United Nations hybrid operation in Darfur, where he served as the Director of Human Rights, Child Protection, and Protection of Civilian, and as a representative to the UN High Commission for Human Rights in Sudan. He also served as the head of human rights operations in South Darfur, head of the Khartoum Human Rights Liaison Office and chair of the Commission on Rule of Law, Voluntary Return and Compensation of IDPs and Refugees in the Doha Peace Process on Darfur. Mr. Akpovo was also the representative in Mauritania of the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Director of Human Rights, Justice and Protection in the UN Mission in Liberia, and OHCHR representative in Liberia. Before joining the UN, he held several national, regional, and international portfolios that included, among others, Africa Coordinator for Pax Romana, Amnesty International as researcher on armed conflicts in Africa, including Uganda. He also served as the director of the editorial board of Courrier d'Afrique, a magazine in France. He has been a reporter for several news agencies and newspapers covering conflicts and post-conflict situations. He has also taught law and international organizations at University of Grenoble in France. Mr. Akpovo is a graduate and postgraduate in communication law and international security and defense from universities of Benin, Nantes, and Grenoble in France. He has authored several academic publications and human rights public reports. Welcome, Marcel. And to join this panel, we also have a young activist, Rinu Odwala. Rinu is the executive director of the Marigold Arao Foundation. It's a civic organization that engages with both domestic and foreign partners to promote and implement capacity development programs. Notably, she was a Harvard Youth Fellow in 2023 at the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C., and has also spoken at over 100 events and universities globally, including the J.F. Kennedy Forum, Harvard University, American University School of International Service. She has been nominated for future awards, Africa for Advocacy and Activism, Forbes African Women Young Achiever Award in 2024, and is the recipient of 100+ honors and awards, including Woman of the Year Advocacy by Her Economy 2022. Let me add to this that Rinu has recently been nominated under our Roots of Resilience program, which will be launched this evening, so she is going to be one of the mentees. So it's good to have you, Rinu. I think from her profile, one of the notable things that we can say about Rinu is that she was spurred by police brutality in Nigeria and beyond, and became a key player in the work to confront the systems and structures that have led to mass incarceration and police killings in Nigeria. Her work spans from social justice, human rights, global health, to democracy. She is passionate about lifting voices and stories of young people across the globe. Welcome, Rinu. And finally, I want to introduce our moderator, Mr. Hassan Shire, the Executive Director of DefendDefenders and Chairperson of African Defenders. He is a human rights defender with over 30 years of experience. He founded DefendDefenders in 2005 after working with the Center for Refugee Studies at York University and with Amnesty International Canada to establish the African Human Rights Defenders Project. Under his leadership, DefendDefenders has grown into a leading regional organization, building strong national coalitions and protection networks for human rights defenders across the Eastern Horn of Africa and beyond. Hassan actively engages regional and international human rights mechanisms such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the UN Human Rights Council, and the World Movement for Democracy to advance the protection of human rights defenders. He serves on several regional and international boards and has been recognized globally for his leadership receiving the U.S. State Department's Human Rights Defender Award. In 2011, the Pan-African Human Rights Defenders Network Leadership Award. In 2015, and the Richard C. Holbrook Leadership Award from Refugees International in 2017. Please join me in welcoming Hassan to moderate this panel.
Hello, Uganda. Hello, the world. And hello, Africa. Hello, East Africa. Hello. We are all here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this. It's a great honor to welcome this great panel to expand today more on what this concept of defending the rights of others means from global perspective, what this concept of civic space, right to protest peacefully, to assemble, to association means at the global level. We need here also to see the implementers of universally recognized human rights standards since Vienna Declaration and Plan of Action, the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, or simply said, UN Human Rights. And then we have here, shall I call you Rinu Jensi, the leader, a grassroots leader who accomplished such a, as you know, memory have narrated, such a great feat in leading a movement, in speaking to people and spreading the gospel of human rights, entitlement and protection. I welcome you, all of you. Good morning, esteemed guests, panelists, and participants. My name, memory said, Hassan Shire, the Executive Director of DefendDefenders and the Chairperson of African Defenders. In short, DefendDefenders works to protect and strengthen human rights defenders in East and Horn of Africa, while African Defenders serves as a Pan-African network that unites and amplifies efforts to safeguard defenders across the continent with these amazing Ubuntu hub cities for relocation and protection of human rights defenders. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 20th anniversary of DefendDefenders. We are live today on NTV and several online platforms as we delve into the future of activism in our evolving world with a theme, and I quote, standing strong, resilience and transcendence of human rights defenders in shifting world. Allow me together to reflect on our achievement, challenge preconceived notion, spark meaningful debate, and untangle the complexities of human rights protection amid global uncertainties. We will also shed light on the diverse experiences of human rights defenders as they navigate this challenging landscape. Our esteemed panelists will share their insights into the dilemmas and the systematic obstacles that lie ahead for human rights defense. As has been introduced, allow me to again mention Mary Lowlord, who is sitting right here, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, Ms. Gina Romero, UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Association and Peaceful Assembly. But it's also heartening to note in this room there are past mandate holders, particularly the Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, the founder, Maina Kiai, who is sitting here, Kalema Vule, who seconded, and Gina Romeo, who is holding the mandate. And protection of human rights defenders mandate, we have our own, Madam Margaret Sakacha, and now Mary Lowlord. In between, there were others, but you are most welcome. Mr. Marcel Akpofo, as I mentioned, Office of the High Commission, and Mr. Rinu, who is now representing activists on the table. Each of you panelists bring valuable experience in promotion and protection of human rights. Once again, welcome to our distinguished guests here in beautiful Africa, specifically the Pearl of Africa, Uganda. Let's kick things by assessing the effectiveness of existing national, regional, and international protection mechanisms for human rights defenders, particularly in Africa. I invite each of you to share a 3-minute preliminary reflection on the innovative practices or models that have proven effective in advancing the safety, the resilience of human rights defenders. I start with no specific order with Mary Lowlord, who will be expounding her 3-minute opening remark. Mary, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. It's really great to be here and to be back with Hassan and Mina and Clement and Margaret and so many other friends in Africa and in Uganda and Kenya. So, and Swaziland, of course. And I recall Tulani, of course, at this moment, whom I went on mission to Zimbabwe with Simpwe and Arnold for the last election. What I am most encouraged by is the development of local, national and regional human rights defender networks, particularly the national networks and women human rights defender networks that have emerged in the last 10 years in Africa, because I'm a huge believer in networks. In the vast majority, in my experience, a human rights defender's local network is its first point of contact when a crisis hits. So their networks should be an integral part of their protection planning. I'm also encouraged by the slowly growing realization among the international community, that is support of governments, donors and INGOs, that it is human rights defenders themselves who know their situation best, who know best the levels of risk they are willing to absorb and can give advice on what they need. A defender from Papua New Guinea recently told me, "We are the experts on our own problems, often without realizing that we have the solutions. The UN treaties and mechanisms are established to guide us, the affected communities, to help drive the process so we can create the solutions for achieving justice and restoring dignity." One thing I learned in this role myself as a dinosaur over the past 5 years was the importance and how effective social media can be in certain circumstances in forcing a government's hand. An example last week was where we posted an allegation letter I'd sent to Kenya on our social media accounts and noted the government had yet again failed to respond to our formal letter. A Kenyan newspaper picked up this social media post and turned it into a front-page story. This resulted in the Kenyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs posting a public statement saying how they were addressing the concerns highlighted in the formal communication, and we have now got our first official response from the Kenyan government since 2017. And then we received another recent example where we posted about multiple death threats a woman human rights defender was facing in Thailand. And this created a stir and resulted in the head of the police force in Bangkok publicly committing in an interview to protecting the women human rights defender concerned. So we use social media now both for visibility and recognition and when defenders are in real danger, but also as an advocacy tool. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. That's a powerful intervention. I will request the rest of panelists as well to speak closer to the microphone. Now let me welcome Gina Romero, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Freedom, Rightful Assembly and Peaceful Association.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, Hassan, over all the adventures that we have been living together for several years now, and then very, very pleased to be with you all. So in the midst of a crisis marked by the decline of democracy, the rise of authoritarianism, the crisis of multilateralism, the securitization of all public agendas, and changes on the financial landscapes, civil society organizations, activists, human rights defenders are constantly innovating and resisting. And then, minding the time, I will highlight only one practice per tactic of repression, but we can actually find a lot more. But just to enlighten which is the strong response that civil society have been doing in these years. So in relation with the stigmatization and the spread of hostile narratives that undermine the value of civil society, the action of the human rights defenders and the work actually of collective action, civil society have been very key in countering narratives, using communications based in hope and not fear, trying to shift the narrative that actually portrayed the work of human rights defenders as terrorists or violent or enemies of the nations, to actually make them aware, make communities, societies aware that they are actually just helping to make better decisions and just to reach a dignified life. Regarding restricting laws and regulations, human rights defenders and civil society activists are doing thorough analysis and sensitization of general public about the impacts of these laws beyond the sector, and linking it also with many other actors, including independent media, to have a wide outreach. In relation of the judicial harassment, including slaps, civil society and human rights defenders have been doing cross-sectoral alliances, increasing bonds with all partners, including the academia, including the independent media, and even pro bono legal support, but also creating new partners. So, for example, there's new groups of protections that have emerged while Gen Z, for example, have been protesting, and then we have seen the bikers in Serbia protecting students, or even professors in different other places, just trying to protect the protest. So they are actually sparking solidarity from outside the sector. Also regarding physical harassment, threats, and including transnational repression, human rights defenders have actually created assistance and rehabilitation programs. And actually, this is like a precise example here in DefendDefenders' work. Taking into account, for example, the funding strategies, human rights defenders and civil society have been rethinking leadership and structures, including the adoption of co-leadership models, and turning to communities and to actually collect more funding and also do some digital fundraising. So they are actually turning back to the basics and to communities. And regarding, and with this, the crisis of multilateralism, human rights defenders can keep coming to us, which is actually very important, because that increases the perception that the system of human rights protections are still valid and important actors, even if the bigger players don't want to see us as such. And then while governments and other actors are trying to silence or curtail collective action, actually human rights defenders are stepping in, fighting back, and then we need to honor that resilience and innovation.
Thank you, Gina. Round of applause. Let me welcome Mr. Marcel Akpofo, whom I met in 2004 in Kampala, operating as a thematic researcher in the office of Amnesty International Secretariat in Kampala. Since then, Marcel, and even before, as his biography said, he was engaged in promotion and protection of human rights. Marcel, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Hassan. This thing says, hello. Is it okay? Hello. Let me get closer to it. Can you hear me now? Okay. No, thank you. I was saying thank you very much, Hassan, for your kind words. And then you were referring to my my role at Amnesty International at that time when we launched this movement, which has grown to become what it is now. But I'm also particularly extremely moved this morning to see in this room many friends, but specifically my brother Musa, who have been with me in the office, spearheading some of these very critical battle for protection of human rights defenders in Africa. My in-law, Clément, we will have to discuss about that later on. Margaret, I'm so happy to see you because you are one of the voices at that time which was very much articulating the need and the necessity of this endeavor. But more so, very particularly, Maina Kiai. Maina, thank you. Maina is the one who actually, okay, hello. Hello, okay. Maina is actually the one who recruited me as a thematic researcher in Amnesty International. Time flies, eh, Maina? It's almost 30 years ago now. So thank you very much to all of you. And then for me, as you can see, it's not just about a celebration, it's also a journey that we have worked together with the recognition of everything that we've been able to endure and also to achieve all together. Talking about the human rights defender movement, one particular point that I would want to make is that over the past decade, protection mechanism for human rights. Which one is better? I think which one is better? This one. Can I buffer? I think let me. Yeah, I think let me use this one. The protection mechanism for human rights defenders have evolved from what we used to know about it as a reactive movement or an engagement to something that is more holistic, resilience-centered process. Of course, that we were more at that time when the movement started, we were fighting for a legal framework, a policy framework that determined who is a human rights defender, and then how we profile every single woman and then men who are advocating for the protection of human rights on behalf of others. We were very much moved and trusted and then preoccupied by the protection and security of them. It hasn't disappeared, it's still there now. But it has really moved to become a more resilient, more holistic approach to something that is very, very well structured. These models that we are seeing now really emphasize, as I say, prevention, empowerment, solidarity, which is central to the work that we all do. I want also to emphasize that the human rights-based approach also, when we look at it from protecting human rights defenders, have transformed the protection into sustainable framework that promotes empowerment, accountability, and structural change, and contributing to a broader realization of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in our countries. In Africa, particularly, so let me focus in Africa, alongside our normative frameworks such as the African Charter, the very recently adopted Maputo Protocol, innovative practices have emerged to strengthen the human rights defender safety and then resilience as well. development of national laws, even if we still have a lot of work to do in terms of implementation of those laws. The policy and implementation mechanism in several African countries, in particular in West and Central, can be taken as innovative and then innovative practice and enhance the safety and resilience of human rights defenders. These laws, which we know that are aimed to institutionalize the human rights defenders protection within domestic legal system and then assign formal responsibility to state actors despite ongoing challenges in alignment and in implementation still remain, from my perspective as OCHR regional director, something that we need to sustain further, which in my view is part of the emerging tools that help us to better speak about human rights defenders, but also to protect them more effectively. One very important development that I would also want to very quickly highlight is the creation of the special rapporteur on human rights defenders and then the focal point on reprisal in Africa with the African Union, of course, which in my view is a major milestone in the regional protection efforts. And that, despite the challenge, I will later on speak about the Addis Ababa roadmap. Clement is here as well, which we are now trying to transform into something that help us to streamline and the engagement from the UN broad system and the African system. The Addis Ababa roadmap as one fundamental tool has helped us not just from the collaborative perspective between the African Union and then the UN system, but also to forge partnership to better support our effort in protecting the human rights defender system, but also from individual cases to a more collective responsibility toward those who risk their life to defend the life and the right of others. Let me end by saying that this holistic protection model, combining legal assistance, relocation, digital security, and psychological effort, have redefined what safety means for human rights defenders. The decline of rule of law, spirit, and culture in many countries globally, but also, most importantly, in Africa, remain a challenge. But this progress from an individual reactive perspective to a more systematized, holistic, resilient system to support the work of a human rights defender is one of the very important progress that we have seen over the years, and for which I commend this fundamental work being accomplished by the Defenders initiative on behalf of the defenders. This model, in my view, combined with the very critical lack of a state commitment to protect human rights defenders, should be nurtured and should remain the central point of our collective journey toward a better protection for human rights defenders on the continent. Thank you very much, Hassan.
Thank you, Marcel. Now let me bring now the current activist voice. Rinu, we want to hear your perspective.
Thank you, and thank you very much. I feel a bit afraid that I've been asked to speak on behalf of human rights defenders in a room full of human rights defenders. But I will try my best. For the young human rights defenders in the room, if I say anything that you don't like, just shout no. But if I say anything that you like, just shout yes, so that I know I'm speaking. Thank you again, and it's a privilege to be here. I know that the UN Special Rapporteurs, they've spoken a lot on the innovative practices for human rights defenders. I would just like to touch on one extra point on standing strong, which is the theme of the panel. And when I think of standing strong, I don't think of strength as the absence of fear for many human rights defenders. I think of standing strong and continuing, even when fear is part of the work. And for many young defenders in Africa, safety does not exist in neat boundaries at home, online, offline, even on the streets. I speak as a young human rights defender from Nigeria, where repression doesn't pause at any time and any moment. And currently we're even getting most likely the help of another country to help us. Anyway, we have bank accounts frozen, we have passports seized, families threatened, and in our reality, the threats, they don't clock out, they just change from Kenya, where young protesters recently faced lethal force on the streets, across Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, where a lot of activists have been tried under military courts. In the Congo, the DRC, where human rights defenders have been disappeared quietly across the continent, Tunisia, Egypt, Chad, Zimbabwe, of recent Tanzania. The African map for human rights defenders is one of arrests, of one of travel bans, and digital repression, internet shutdowns during protests, and recently, as we've seen in elections, coordinated disinformation, algorithmic amplification of hate, especially against women and also queer defenders. But what is clear as well is how young Africans are adapting in spite of this repression. In Nigeria, after the NSAS protests was quashed brutally, there were informal legal aid networks that connected protesters that were being arrested to lawyers who were volunteering within minutes. In Sudan, we've seen that people are forming encrypted networks to keep documenting the brutal abuses that are currently happening when the internet was cut off. And maybe that is what resilience looks like right now for human rights defenders. Not always visible, but it has to be constant. I think that human rights defenders have learned to think of safety as being collective, not individual. It's in the solidarity fund that pays someone's bill. It's in the friend who checks on you if you got home safe after a protest. And it's survival built through a community. I also think that we are reimagining what solidarity looks like. We are recently seeing more cross-border collaborations. Young activists in Ghana standing, with those in Liberia. Recently, even Kenyans threatening to go and protest in Tanzania. And I think that is the future of protection from networks that we grow within. Because at this point, every human rights defender I know is both an activist and a first responder. We are the ones calling lawyers, we are the ones backing up data, getting evidence, organizing safe transport, crowdfunding, and the rest. And I think that to end this, I think that's what standing strong meant to human rights defenders. A lot of us, survival that is built through solidarity with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. With these 4 brief interventions as an opening for this great panel, let me turn individually now to Mary Lowlott. Mary, what are some key global milestones that have shaped the protection of human rights defenders? Secondly, our international commitment to safeguard human rights defenders becoming stronger or weaker, and what's behind that trend from where you sit?
Sorry, I couldn't see it. So first of all, I want to give a quick personal milestone for me, which was this man here. Because when I set up Frontline Defenders and I used to go to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, I didn't know any of the African delegations at the council, but Hassan knew everyone. And he used to introduce me to all the African delegations, so I could add my voice also on the lobbying for the protection of human rights defenders. So that really was a personal milestone for me. I suppose the ones that really stand out for me over my career were, first of all, the Beijing summit. which launched the platform for women human rights defenders to strategize, to network and to agitate. And I was in Beijing in 1995, and to see the thousands of women there made me realize that when women come together and work together, they can do anything. The second thing was the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights, which had such a seminal effect on the setting up of the machinery to help protect human rights. Of course, we should ask Gina, can she sing the song that the Chilean and the Latin Americans led everyone in when the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders passed? The people united will never be defeated, but it sounds better in Spanish. So you can do it later. So never before at that meeting had I seen so many human rights defenders. I'd come from Amnesty International, and at that meeting I met, the Paris Summit, I met so many human rights defenders that I decided to set up Frontline Defenders. And, you know, I realized that it is human rights defenders at the local level and the national level who build civil and just societies, and change comes from within. The creation then of this position in 2000 and the rapporteurships in the Inter-American Commission and the African Commission, and most recently the creation of a position on environmental defenders under the Aarhus Agreement. All of these have helped solidify the position of human rights defenders in international human rights law and further entrench international norms and standards. I also think the development of the EU guidelines on human rights and the fact that several states have brought in their own guidelines to help protect human rights defenders is another milestone. I mean, we all know they're far from perfect. And really, you know, there's so much more that could be done with more political will and more persistence. But at the same time, they are something that defenders can concretely work with when they are looking for protection. And I met last week with the British Foreign Ministry, and they have just updated their own human rights defender guidelines in a context where governments around the world are deprioritising human rights. So it is something that human rights defender guidelines continue to be developed. And another breakthrough last year it was in the visa code, in the EU visa code that provides for visas for specifically for human rights defenders. Now, it has to be implemented, of course, but it is the first breakthrough for EU member states to get visas on the agenda. And then, given the terrible risks faced by environmental defenders, the recognition of the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment as a universal human right, first by the Human Rights Council in 21 and then the General Assembly in 22, was a significant development, and it gave environmental defenders another tool to establish their legitimacy and demand protection. And lastly, the development of human rights defender protection laws in West Africa has been very encouraging. And again, I'd be the first to say that they need a lot of work, but the protection work is always a gradual process. And with these laws, defenders in West Africa have their foot in the door. Will I go on to the second one, or do you want me to stop?
Stop here. It's interesting to stop Mary Lowlord when she's dwelling at those milestones. It was so great to hear. So the commitment to the safeguard, you mean the second question I asked you?
The second one, the international commitments, I can say a few words about that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure whether you wanted them together.
No, please.
There's huge disillusionment, as I'm sure you all know, among many human rights defenders around the world that I speak to regarding the international system to protect human rights and human rights defenders, and failure of the system to protect defenders and civilians in the worst situations. I mean, we're all heartbroken by what's going on in Sudan and in the DRC. We got a message from Eastern Congo last week which read from a defender: "We continue to struggle with HRD cases in a shrinking space. We have currently around 10 cases that need assistance, including a kidnapping. The kidnapped defender was found tortured and abandoned in a street. He's under treatment in a health facility. We also need support to pay for his health care fees. But my mandate, for example, has no funding to support cases like these, and I have to just try and find somebody somewhere who has the funds to try and support those cases. But there is a lack in the international community that creates, protection mechanisms for human rights defenders, but fails to fund them adequately. And fails to give them binding powers. And the double standards that were there in relation to Israel and Gaza have exacerbated the disillusionment, especially when governments that had traditionally been supporters of human rights defenders stayed silent for so long and facilitated the slaughter of civilians and human rights defenders in Gaza. And one defender from Algeria said to me, "When grave violations are met with silence, double standards or political compromise, defenders begin to question whether the principles of universality and accountability truly apply to all." But this is a system of a trend that's been long apparent. The international commitments to human rights defenders are only promoted when it is in a state's political and strategic interests to do so. States go easy on their friends and dump on their enemies. And there's rarely any consistency in the application of human rights standards across the world. So while I believe the international architecture to protect human rights defenders has expanded, as I mentioned earlier, the commitment of states to really support that architecture has lessened. And we've seen this in the massive funding cuts of the human rights ecosystem undertaken by the US, the UK, Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, France, Sweden and others in the last couple of years. And money is being directed away from people who are working for justice, accountability and peace, and instead directed towards weapons, security and defence. Gina recently did an excellent report on how civil society around the world is being impacted by these cuts. Thank you.
Thank you. As a lead human rights defender, Mary Lowlord, she also names names because that ecosystem which is collapsing and the double standard which is a prevalent international human rights discourse must be pointed. Must be pointed. We must point that and say that this is a double standard. Thank you so much, Mary, for doing that. Let me now turn to Gina Romero. How do difference in legal interpretation across jurisdictions exacerbate global enforcement disparities for fundamental freedoms?
Well, thanks, Hassan. So you know that the core responsibility of states regarding freedom of assembly and of association and other rights is to refrain from interference and actively protect these rights, right? But national disparities on the interpretation of these rights and its components and on its protection, as well as disparities from the different regional and global mechanisms of protection, undermine these two obligations, but also the rights itself. They impact, among others, the principle of universality of the enjoyment of these rights. So some governments or groups of governments have stricter interpretation of these rights than others, and it is a fact that people in some countries can enjoy the freedom of assembly and of association rights better than people in other countries and regions. But restrictions are becoming increasingly coherent across jurisdictions, which is actually one of my main concerns right now. But some of these reinterpretations are related, for example, of the weaponization of common agreed agendas, such as the fight against terrorism or against money laundering, to stigmatize, harass, criminalize, curtail dissent, take revenge from specific actors, to weaken civil society sector and the use of protest as a tool of expression and collective action. I want to highlight some of these interpretations that are extremely dangerous. So in many contexts, governments are actually denying the existence of the freedom of access to resources as a vital component of the freedom of association, which is actually justifying the adoption of ill-intended laws, including the foreign agent laws and the criminalization of activists and civil society organizations. And also, another one is the increased portrait of disruption made by protests as act of violence and even as act of terror, which is actually very harmful, as we all know. The disruptive characteristic of assemblies is at the center of the exercise of the freedom of assembly right. So the main problem of these interpretations and others, we have some actors that don't recognize, for example, the right of protest as a right. And that is just actually deeply problematic for the people who is actually exercising this right. But the main problem of this interpretation is that they are taking away the legitimacy of the rights, and they are stigmatizing the people who exercise them, including, of course, human rights defenders and civil society organizations and activists. And in many settings, this is causing dissolutions of associations and the killings of civil society organizations and human rights defenders. And they are also silencing citizens to express their dissents from one side, and are also radicalizing peaceful actors that are completely fed up with the whole situation. And this is a horrible storm that we are seeing how it is evolving in many places. We all know that there is an authoritarian playbook that is being used against rights and freedoms. And then we have like a twin phenomena, right? The increase of the restrictions of these rights in national settings, and also the weakening of the multilateralism. So hand to hand, these two phenomena reinforce themselves. So autocratic regimes are more in power and in the multilateral settings, and those actions in the multilateralism are not being balanced to the reduction of the democratic rights and champions. We are losing all the champions that we had in the past. And I've been the whole year, that has been one of my core issues the whole year, trying to figure out where are the other champions for rights and freedoms and democracy. And I need to tell you that I haven't found a new one. It's something very problematic. But then also, when the multilateral setting is weakened, then the mutual accountability that is set there is not enforced, and then rights, freedoms, protection just dilutes. And also, let me mention in the minute I still have, the disparities between the regional bodies' protection and the weakening of the global mechanism at the UN, which are also problematic. And then let me give you two very concrete examples. So recently, the European Union adopted a revised list that prohibits and control the use and export of law enforcement instruments that are either inherently torturous or can be misused to torture. And this is very important, as some of these instruments are actually being used in the context of protests. But then in other continents, the development is very reduced or inexistent. But then, for example, here in Africa, And not only, we can see my own continent, Latin America, well, America, the continent, the use of lethal force is the highest problem. So talking about law enforcement and the use of lethal weapons, it's very good in some contexts, and then I was really pleased of what was happening in the EU. But then in other places falls so short that even our action is very difficult to balance, when in some places we have some advances and in some places we don't. Another example, the types of technologies used to surveil protesters and human rights defenders. So you can name it, like Pegasus, facial recognition technologies, the use of drones to actually harass communities and organizations and their activities. And then these technologies are sustained on a global market for surveillance, as well as the global market for law enforcement technologies, including the less lethal weapons. But again, the impact are very different, felt very differently in different countries, with different access of justice, with different actors, with different strengths on civil society, but also in the regional bodies. So fails on the UN and other regional bodies and multilateral institutions to actually push for the adoptions for more regulations, better regulations at the national level. But then, for example, treaties and other type of regulations at the regional and global level, and for the real implementation of all possible human rights safeguards, also actually deepen the imbalance and also risk the sustainability of the good practices that we have now. So these are go hand to hand, and that's very problematic. Sorry it took a little longer.
Thank you. Thank you. Marcel, from the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, the UN, regional perspective, how can UN offices better support local efforts for early warning, rapid response, and protection of African HRDs? How do you assess state commitment in the implementing their obligations under the international human rights framework, both Vienna Convention and Plan of Action? And what could be the best approach to support states in honoring these obligations?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hassan. I think this is, two layers in your question. The first, certainly, I will deal with the first part later. But let me just offer some observation on how state commitment in implementing the obligation fare particularly on the continent. State commitment to international human rights obligation, of course, varies significantly from across the context or from country to country. But overall, what we see is that there's a growing recognition of the importance of this framework, particularly in legislative reform and institutional development, and then engagement with regional and international mechanisms. So many states, of course, this is not really a secret to anyone in this room, have ratified key human rights treaties and then established national human rights institutions, such as the Human Rights Commissions and then the Office of the Ombudsman, try from a purely legislative and then policy perspective to create and then establish a framework that help them to fulfill their commitment. But the major challenge, and this is the dialogue and the conversation that I always have with states in my current responsibility, ratification alone is not enough to fulfill obligation. And implementation in many, many cases remain uneven, and even, I would say, very limited. One of the very persistent challenges in the gap between normative commitment and then practical implementation remain the, should I call it inability of a state, or sometimes due to various reasons, lack of state to fulfill this obligation, this commitment that they have made. To support states, my office believe that we should adopt definitely very constructive, cooperative, and capacity building approach, what we call the technical cooperation through specific assistance. Policy dialogue. Policy dialogue is extremely important for OHCHR, for my office, to support a state to fulfill their obligation under international and regional human rights instrument. We also need definitely to strengthen national ownership by state of their obligation. When states see human rights not as external imposition, but as an integral development, peace, and then human rights, they are more likely to invest in implementation. But when they think otherwise, which is most of the time the case in many of our African countries, it becomes something extremely difficult. The regional mechanisms such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights also play a very important role in reinforcing accountability, peer learning, and in that regard, what we do, what my office does, is to encourage support by state, from state, to this human rights dedicated instrument for the African Union to fulfill their obligations as they see them, which is not most of the time the case. I know definitely how the jurisdiction of the African Court is being weakened every single day. I know how difficult it is for states to implementation decision or ruling of the African Court, which in many aspects not just to weaken the institution that the African Union has established, but also pose a very fundamental question about political commitment to sustain our will as a state to see functioning and then effective tools and then mechanisms to support them in implementing their own human rights obligation. We also believe very strongly in the power of the national human rights institutions. And I believe that this is something that is for decades, for years, has been really underrated by states themselves. And yet, they know definitely their obligation under the Paris Principle and how much the oversight and responsibility of this national human rights institution should be at the service of a state to fulfill their own obligations. One state, for example, feels that supporting financially a national human rights institution place on that National Human Rights Commission the obligation to serve state interest. I think that we still have a lot of work to do in that regard, and my office is supporting internal proactive dialogue to make sure that on one hand we have a robust national human rights institution, but also a much better political understanding by state vis-a-vis their support to those institutions. The other aspect, our role in supporting national efforts, in supporting states in fulfilling their obligation is not directly related, but how important and critical it is to bring into the equation the role of civil society organizations. And then I think that my colleagues were talking about shrinking civic space in a global context that is not favoring the culture of human rights. And our role in OHCHR is to continue strengthening civil society organizations to play their role as entity that support states to fulfill their own obligation. And this is our role. I usually say, and then when I have a conversation with government officials, I say my role is not to do things for them. My role is to support them to fulfill their primary obligation vis-à-vis their own people. And that is the translation of the mutually reinforcing collaboration and cooperation that we need to have between states and then the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Ultimately, the best approach is one that combines principal engagement with practical support, ensuring that states are equipped, encouraged, and held accountable to fulfill their human rights obligation in a way that is sustainable and transformative. But that is a daunting challenge as we engage the state on the field. Now, the second part of your question is intrinsically related to the first one. How do we support early warning system and then early actions to enable effective engagement by human rights defenders in their job? It's very ironic that normally if states were fulfilling their obligation, there will be no human rights defender communities and then an engagement. It is because of the failure of states to fulfill their obligation that we have individual and growingly now collective engagement and commitment by people to demand their rights, to claim their rights, and then also to organize themselves to exist. And I like saying that it is not just for them, but for the state to recognize and then also to fulfill those obligations. And this, as I indicated in my preliminary remark, should no longer be a business of a reactive intervention, security-focused intervention. It has to take the form of a resilience-building structural support to system, to individuals that help us to claim rights and then to demand rights. And it is not just about what has happened. We need, and this is what my office is doing now, to identify early warning elements to protect those people who are using their courage, those people who are using their commitment, their belief in human rights to support state fulfillment of their obligation. We have a very interesting initiative going right now that we're doing with the African Union in embedding a human rights early warning to support the early warning system of the African Union. Of course, it is about conflict prevention, but within it, what we're trying to do with the community at the regional level is to understand, to make use of the civil society, to understand that the data we collect, the intervention that we make on behalf of human rights protection help us to detect early challenge that colleagues face in the society, in their work, and trigger some engagement by states to help protect them further. But that is another story. And as I indicated, I have my good friend Yared, who is in this room, and then I remember very well when I was still with Amnesty International, we were developing, Musa and myself, this concept of placement. And the concept of placement of a human rights defender, what does it entail? It was to remove a human rights defender from a place where they face a very significant risk to another place in Africa, because the idea was to prevent our human rights defenders to migrate to maybe Europe or Western countries, but to remain the capacity on the continent. What we identify, what we learn from that experiment was that states always, when human rights defenders are not in jail, they want them to be very far away from the country, very far away. Increasing nowadays digital surveillance, cross-border threat to human rights defenders, mutual cooperation between states to challenge the activity of human rights defenders wherever they find themselves in. Our role right now is to make sure that while we are advocating for a very safe, wide civic space, we also integrate the necessity of early warning into the modality of our support to states to understand that human rights defenders are not an enemy to states. They are not enemy to states. They are just a step. They are just supporting states or reminding states of their primary obligation vis-à-vis their own people. And the last point that I wanted to make is, I mentioned it before, is the early warning policy dialogue. Early warning policy dialogue may sound something very theoretic, but it is very real. Encouraging networking. I have very many of my friends from the East African Women Human Rights Defender Network that we are supporting right now. And then different presences at the country level to organize themselves and translate their commitment into gathering information that can help their activism in terms of detecting threats and then also preventing retaliation against those who are advocating for the right of the people. My office is supporting that initiative. My office is collecting a lot of information. My office is supporting those networks that we are emulating across the continent to make sure that they don't just serve the purpose of intervening when there is a crisis, but also try to be at the forefront of information collection, analysis of threat from a preventing perspective that can really hamper the work of human rights defenders at the country level. And in conclusion, I want to say that if we do have states who believe in their commitment to their international obligations, their primary responsibility to their own people, we would have a much easier work for the human rights defenders. And then I joke sometimes that we may not even have a human rights defender constituency simply because states might have already conducted themselves in a way that the protection issues is not anymore an issue for them. But unfortunately, we still have a very long way to go. I will end by saying that while we see a growing trend from a civil society organization, individually, but right now, collectively again, because we have the Gen Z movement, which is telling us how rapidly the concept of HRD is evolving, while we have those structuring systematizations of engagement by civil society organizations, human rights defenders, individually and collectives, we need to advise, we need to call on states also to organize themselves, to set up institutions, frameworks, platforms for protecting human rights defenders. When we arrive at that, when states deliberately take action to protect human rights defenders, we will be in a partnership that doesn't aim only at protecting those who are at risk, but that help everyone, including the state, to better fulfill their primary protection obligation vis-à-vis their own people, because they are the custodians of that accountability demand, they are the custodian of that responsibility, they are the primary custodian of that obligation vis-à-vis their people. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you really for expanding that. And early warning policy dialogue. With the state party, because we have to speak to each other with the other stakeholders. Rachel, as young human rights defender, facing daily challenges, as you describe it even in your open remark, what strategies have you and others developed to address emerging threats? This is a question, even last night, yesterday, at NTV, the same platform, one of my staff was asked, protectors of human rights, defenders, who protects them? What are the strategies for your survival?
Thank you very much for that question. I think that it's sad that human rights defenders, while trying to defend human rights, are often the very first victims of human rights abuses. And I think that the strategies that many of us have employed is very negative, like leaving the country in order to be able to protect our families or keep them safe from harm, diversifying some of our passions and what we do. For example, I've had to leave Nigeria for 5 years since the NSAS protest, and I met Azan last year, and he never knew that I was a beneficiary of DefendDefenders initiative until I met him at the World Movement for Democracy Assembly by Viota Jonen last year. And his staff, Joseph, Walder, Christabel, the rest have been very, very instrumental to keeping this human rights defender defending human rights even while away from the country. I also think that a lot of human rights defenders have had to rewrite what protection looks like for our generation. The traditional models of protection that have worked for Hassan's generation may not work for us because across Africa we can see that the pattern is the same, just like Marcella said, Mary, Gina. The more young people speak up today, instead of the state listening to them, the more the state pushes back. Again, we've talked about Sudan, we've talked about Congo, the states currently under military rule in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Tunisia, Egypt, Nigeria. We now have a lot of cybercrime laws that are designed to police dissent online. In countries like Tanzania and Nigeria, journalists and human rights defenders are arrested for tweets and for criticism of the state. Even in South Africa, the same thing. I think that in this new era of emerging threats, the digital space have become the new front line, and that's one major topic I'm going to talk about. And the danger in having the internet becoming the new front line is that entire populations can be silenced at the click of one button or at one command, just like we've seen in Tanzania and the conflicting reports that are coming from the country. And when you shut down the internet, it's not just speech that is being silenced, it's also evidence that is being erased from several quarters. So right now we are no longer afraid of soldiers and guns on the street. We're also afraid of surveillance, we're afraid of disinformation that are meant to discredit human rights defenders. And one of the strategies is that we've now had to defend against the fact that human rights defenders are doing this for profit, and the information campaigns that have gone against human rights defenders that they're merely doing this because they want to earn money from one source or the other, which is untrue, because a lot of human rights defenders actually fell into the space by chance or out of, accident, or an event happened to them that made them, really decide that this cannot continue to go on. But here's the truth. We are not passive or cannot afford to become passive victims of these emerging threats, especially the one on the digital space, because we can't afford to abandon the work that we've already been doing. Too many lives depend on the human rights defenders in this room and outside this room to innovate and to adapt. For example, in Nigeria, you have the networks for the legal aids, the VPNs that we've talked about. In Uganda, we have, African defenders, Ubuntu hub cities that relocate those in immediate danger. And why do these strategies work? Because they are built on trust and urgency. They are also designed by the people at risk. And to every human rights defender here, I think that our protection and our strategies must now be people-driven. They must be very, very tech-informed and rooted in our own local realities. And our future and the future of human rights protection in Africa lies in this balance, to innovate with tech and to stand with each other. By the generation before us, the now generation, and the future that is coming. As long as we are living in an era where freedom is under attack in 5G, our protection, human right protection, must also move at the speed of the attack in 5G, and it must be very fast. And I like to say that we cannot, again, as we've seen with development, new development, afford to wait to be saved. And that's why we have to co-create the systems that will keep us safe, because for young Africans, defending rights is not a career for us. Our lives literally depend on it. Survival for us today means strategy. It means that we have to invest in mental health, peer support. Burnout is real, trauma is real. Over 60% of human rights defenders are feeling unsafe or emotionally exhausted. So we have to we are building the strategy safe spaces together, even safe spaces like this where you come and see that there are also several human rights defenders across the continent doing the work that you're doing in your country, and we are not alone. And also we diversify and move into different spaces. If one space is censored, we have to make sure that we find another while trying to gain that space back. Our strength is in our ability to innovate instantly. Again, in the speed of the attack, which is, if the attack is in 5G, we also innovate in 5G. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. And now let us turn to the audience. We'll have a question and answer. The expert panel will respond. Pardon? Yeah. But I would also appreciate by our technologists here if they can pick one or two questions, or maybe the crew of the NTV, one or two questions online, because this program is being followed and watched by audience beyond this room. So if you can get one or two pertinent questions to the expert here, which is it's not easy to assemble them, it will be beneficial. Getting back to our panelists then, please keep your contributions concise to maximize interventions and accommodate as many voices as possible. So now I will entertain the hands raised. I'll try to scan the room. Okay, Olali, and then my sister from South Sudan and my brother behind, and then we continue. Oh, and again, founder here.
Je vous remercie.
Okay, yeah. Oh, please.
Je vous remercie. Mon nom c'est Eulalie Niwizi. Je coordonne la coalition burundaise des défenseurs des droits de l'homme, travaillant en exil depuis 10 ans ici en Ouganda. Ma question s'adresse spécialement à Marcel.
Please introduce yourself.
Oui. J'ai précisé que je m'appelle Eulalie Niwizi. Je suis burundaise et je coordonne la coalition burundaise des défenseurs des droits de l'homme travaillant en exil ici en Ouganda. Je suis en exil depuis 10 ans, comme la plupart d'entre nous, dont les membres se trouvent en Tanzanie, en RDC, au Rwanda, ici en Ouganda et d'autres au-delà. Je parle de ceux qui se trouvent dans la sous-région. Ma question, c'est juste d'abord de remercier et de féliciter les DefendDefenders pour cette initiative, mais aussi d'avoir mis sur le panel des personnalités qui nous informaient spécialement sur les sujets qui nous préoccupent. Et si je reviens sur ma question, vous avez parlé des initiatives au niveau de votre bureau pour soutenir les États en mettant en application les engagements. Mais il m'a semblé que j'ai compris le soutien des États pour mettre en œuvre les engagements au niveau national. Je voudrais savoir s'il y a des initiatives en cours ou déjà déclenchées pour soutenir les engagements des États qui reçoivent les réfugiés. Et là, je m'exprime en ce qui concerne la situation des défenseurs des droits de l'homme en exil. et là spécialement en Tanzanie et ici en Ouganda. Là, je ne parlais pas de la RDC, mais spécialement en Tanzanie et ici en Ouganda. Je peux remercier sincèrement le gouvernement de l'Ouganda qui nous abrite pour la protection qu'il nous assure. Toutefois, ces derniers temps, ça fait des mois, des années, nous observons une situation d'infiltration des milieux de réfugiés, spécialement dans les camps de réfugiés de Nakib Valley, où nous trouvons des cadavres, des attaques, et la plupart des cas, ce sont des victimes de la liberté d'expression. On le découvre tardivement, mais aussi des menaces directes contre les défenseurs des droits de l'homme en exil, en ligne, et même des informations que maintenant même, nous sommes sous menace. Maintenant que je vous parle, nous sommes sous menace. Alors, quelles sont les initiatives pour protéger les défenseurs des droits de l'homme en exil en tant que système des Nations Unies chargé des réfugiés? D'une part, au niveau de l'ouverture de la communication, il est difficile de communiquer avec le système des Nations Unies par même les ONG de contact, parce qu'il faut toujours passer par le téléphone, le helpline. S'il faut passer par le helpline, ce n'est pas toujours facile. Alors, il y a une question d'accessibilité aux mécanismes qui sont mis en place au niveau sous-régional. Nous voudrions être informés de ça, mais aussi de savoir comment soutenir les défenseurs des droits de l'homme en exil qui sont sous menace pour que l'alerte soit rapide, mais aussi pour que l'intervention soit rapide au niveau de vos services. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Holali. I think at times, to make it more precise, when I say thank you, then you shorten your speech. When I say thank you so much, it means your time is up. So much if I had so. Okay. Yeah, my sister.
Yeah, I listen.
Take the floor. Please stand up, identify yourself, and raise your pertinent question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adil Christina. I'm the Deputy Chair for the South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network. Straight to my question. With the country faced with the lack of early warning mechanism in place, and also there is no privacy when it comes to attending meetings where you need a national security clearance letter from the government for a meeting of more than 15 people in the country. We have no privacy as per se, and then we also have the bad infrastructure because most of our defenders are all in the states and the 3 administrative areas, and the infrastructure getting there is very hard. And also for the plane to land, it takes time. So in most cases, communication becomes very hard between us and our defenders. We also have a problem of fragmentation, infiltration of the CSO work, and we also have disunity, which is really something hard. We also have government buying the HRDs for a token of silence when it comes to speaking out for the human rights defenders. Now, our sister told us earlier that we have the traditional models of protection may not work, and I would like to ask, if they don't work, what modalities can we deploy in such cases? Because apparently there is high dropout in the country for the HRDs because most people are trying to save themselves and save their families. Because once you die, you don't have a replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very pertinent and very precise question. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Omara Joseph Wani, and I work for South Sudan Human Rights Defenders Network. My question goes to Reno. I agree with your narrative that the states are now employing surveillance on human rights defenders. But again, there's also a justification that the states are giving, and that is misinformation. I would like to know from you, how do we now bridge that gap between protecting the freedom of expression and also the need to combat misinformation and also bad content online. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, you changed your position. You want to still take, but before that, Harriet.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kuyang Harriet Logo. I am a consultant on governance and rule of law, and I am from South Sudan, and I am one of the founders of Defenders. 20 years ago, we were here, and I was a very young girl back then. Amazing conversations from the panel, and my question is not to a specific representative, but I throw it to all of you. One thing that I have noticed over the years on working in the area of governance and rule of law and access to justice and human rights broadly is that even the rights that are enshrined internationally and in our national constitutions are beginning to be more compressed, and human rights defenders across the board are becoming even more invisible. A long time ago, when I was representing South Sudan here, I was talking more freely, interacting more freely, publishing more freely, and then suddenly, because of the digital era, we are having to see ourselves hiding, becoming invisible, so we are able to survive and live to tell another day. My question then is, how can we further strengthen these networks so that even in our invisibility, we can still voice out the concerns of the many whose rights are trampled upon? And finally, to Monsieur Marcel, I am from South Sudan, a country of a very difficult context, and then I decided also to get married to a Cameroonian. So the events in Douala touch me very closely. As somebody who has this dual opportunities to live there and work, you know, how do we then enhance the research? They are very interconnected areas. I remember earlier on you said you work for Amnesty International, I think a long time ago. How then do we strengthen the interconnectedness, especially of research? I am also an academic at the University of Juba. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. I will still continue picking up. Andrew, you still want to take the floor? Yeah.
Thank you, Hassan. Mine is, I'm Andrews from Rwanda. The honorable mandate holders, the two honorable ladies who have this
Identify
mandate.
yourself.
Huh?
Who you are, what do you do?
Andrews from Rwanda.
Very good,
Yes.
yeah.
So how is it easy to, how do you find it easy to do your work without funding? Because as we have seen, as we have heard, everyone is talking about funding. And if the mandate holders don't have funding, how is it easy for you to discharge your duties when you don't have funding? When everyone is speaking about funding, and the mandate holders themselves don't have funding to help defenders. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Money all the time is central to that. Madam, I will come back to you. Let me now go to Somalia. Iman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Hassan, for the opportunity, and thank you to the panels for such important insights you shared today. My name is Iman Abdgreen. I am a human rights lawyer from Somalia, founder and CEO of Hilo Farm, and board member of Defenders Coalition Somalia. My chair is here. My question is today directed to Ms. Gina and Ms. Mary. In Somalia, we are struggling policy reform. So, very recently, Somalia has ratified very important charter, African Charter on rights and welfare of the child, but unfortunately, it made reservation in the key important protections like child marriage. And also we are not still part of important conventions like CEDAW and Maputo Protocol. And human rights defenders like myself in fragile states are not only facing threats from the government or other armed groups, but we are also facing strong social and cultural pressure. So my question is, since Somalia is dependent on donors, including UN, what's important role that your mandates can make in pushing policy reform and also accountability for human rights protection in contexts like us? Thank you.
That's a very well articulated question and boldness. Just transfer the microphone to your neighbor. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hassan Nuruddin from Nigeria. I'm a governance and accountability advocate. My question is, given the context, the shifting context in the world today, the introduction of AI has changed the way we do a lot of things. Governance in most part of the continent is not what it used to be. For example, I'm from Nigeria, and we know what it is in Nigeria, and also the West African region. You can see Niger, Mali, and the others under coup. The entire region is unstable as it used to be some 10, 15 years ago. And so what can human rights advocates do in that regard, as even when you decide to leave your own country to be able to continue your work elsewhere, even within your region, you are still facing dictatorship from other countries who are, looking at it from that perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now let me give the floor to Madam Magar Sakaja.
Hassan, we didn't get that.
Huh?
What was that question about? Gina and I didn't get that question. What was it about?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a quick one to our young youth.
Oh, no, I got the Somali one.
What do you see as the early warning signs within the East African region, especially with the Gen Zs? Early warning. Could you tell us what we should look out for, what is likely to happen? The other one is for you. The protection laws. We have not managed to get these laws within Africa. It's a long time ago we started with talking about the law protecting human rights defenders. They don't seem to be popular, and the people don't seem to understand that one day those laws are applicable to them too. They don't appreciate. They think they are right there, and others, that's your business. How do we overcome that?
Thank you, Madam. I appreciate it. There's also another microphone somewhere here, but now questions are becoming a bit more, and we have to also manage time because we will be also launching a report. I'll give the second round. I acknowledge your hands. Oh, Doctor, welcome. I acknowledge your hands. I'll give you the second round. Now let me take the floor back to the panelists. With no specific order, I will start the Gen Z. We see you on the road. Chub, you all come. But we were wondering, what's going on here? What early warning, as Madam Magar Sakaji said, you can also provide us when you are jumping into different kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think that the early warning signs are signs that have always been there, but the society refuses to take note of and then wait until it becomes a mass boiling point for the population of the continent that is the fastest growing, and we'll have the most young people by 2050. We already know what our issues are as Africans. We need money. Our young people are unemployed. The economy is in shambles. I was speaking with Ryota Jonen yesterday, and we were talking about the definition of democracy in Africa for Africans. And there was a question asked if Africans are really practicing democracy, because I said that the model of democracy we practice today is unsustainable for young Africans. We are not reaping the dividends of democracy. So, but the question that was then asked back to me was, are we really practicing democracy in Africa, or a facade of democracy? So I do think that the early warning signs are there. If you have a population that are largely unemployed and they are seeing the people who were largely elected, or we can say elected by the populace, living in largesse, in a country that is full of mineral resources, that is not affected by hurricanes or earthquakes. Africa is so blessed that we don't really have a lot of natural disasters. Our natural disasters are the people that we've elected to rule us in the countries. So those are the warning signs, I believe. They are there. Unemployment, police brutality, for example. You cannot have a young population that is constantly being harassed by the police, the same people that are meant to protect them, and you wouldn't have them spilling on the street. You cannot have elections being rigged in a country full of young people. Many African parents are here today. We know our struggles with the younger generation and the fact that we feel our needs are assert our own independence and our own views and our own opinions. And so if that population is in a continent and their worries and their opinions are being waved aside, then you have a problem on your end. You would have more protests, you would have more looting, you would have more chaos in the society if this problem of unemployed youth is not contained, this problem of elections rigging and subverting of the people's will is not contained, the problem of police brutality is not contained. We are mostly online today, and we see how other societies are run, and we look back at our own societies and we're like, where did we go wrong? Why was I born an African in the first place? And many young Africans are seeking to go to the West to improve their fortunes. Why? Africa is a blessed continent because, again, our natural disasters are right in our parliament, in our government houses, and they refuse to leave for better people to get there and do their own thing. So those are the early warning signs, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. You wanted to respond to some questions? Which less than a minute,
yes.
Huh?
Oui. Allow me to speak in French to respond to the first question by my sister, who found herself in exile in Uganda from Burundi. Vous avez à juste titre d'ailleurs demandé quelles sont les initiatives que le bureau, le système des Nations Unies prend pour protéger des défenseurs des droits de l'homme ou des personnes qui se retrouvent en exil dans leur intégrité physique, mais aussi dans leur travail. D'abord, je voudrais préciser que moi, je suis le Haut Commissariat des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme. Je ne représente pas ici le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés. Donc, le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés le HCR a tout un système en place pour gérer les cas individuels et collectifs des gens qui se retrouvent en exil dans un pays donné, et je crois que c'est de leur responsabilité. Je crois que, comme vous l'avez si bien dit, l'Ouganda est un pays très accueillant pour les réfugiés. Et je crois que aussi ça a été quelque chose qui est reconnu dans le système des Nations Unies, et on s'en félicite. Mais cela ne change pas les défis de sécurité et de protection individuelle auxquels les défenseurs des droits de l'homme ou les gens qui fuient la persécution de leur pays pour se retrouver dans un autre pays, cela ne change pas ces défis auxquels ils sont confrontés. Et à juste titre d'ailleurs, comme je l'indiquais, ce que nous avions initié au moment où j'étais encore avec Amnesty International, c'était de développer ce concept de placement. Ce concept de placement qui permettrait évidemment à des gens comme vous de pouvoir être protégés individuellement, c'est-à-dire si vous vous sentez surveillé ici, on vous déplace et on vous amène dans un contexte qui est un peu plus protecteur, notamment safe pour vous, et vous soutenir au fur et à mesure que vous évoluez. Mais avec le développement très rapide des réseaux sociaux, des nouvelles technologies auxquelles nous sommes confrontés actuellement, même les questions de placement deviennent quelque chose de très important. Et mon bureau le reconnaît. Ce que nous encourageons, c'est de combattre ce que j'appelais tout à l'heure les défis et les menaces transfrontalières auxquelles des gens comme vous sont confrontés et qui, d'une façon ou d'une autre, sont réels. Il y a eu des coopérations ou des coopérations entre États pour menacer encore des gens qui ont fui leur pays ou bien même leur pays d'accueil pour se retrouver dans un safe haven. Ce que nous encourageons, c'est évidemment, de continuer à travailler moins individuellement, mais en synergie. C'est pour ça que tout à l'heure, j'évoquais la nécessité de construire des plateformes, des réseaux de défenseurs des droits de l'homme qui peuvent aider beaucoup à annihiler les effets pervers d'une telle menace contre les défenseurs des droits de l'homme. Deuxièmement, il faut coûte que coûte que nous réinventions complètement la problématique de la protection des gens qui ont fui la persécution chez eux pour se retrouver dans un endroit qu'ils estiment un protecteur, mais qui ne le sont pas. Cette réinvention passe nécessairement et obligatoirement par la prise en compte, la prise de conscience du changement de modèle de protection. Et nous prenons notre responsabilité et nous en appelons toujours aux États qui accueillent des gens comme vous de pouvoir exercer leurs obligations, leurs devoirs de protection vis-à-vis de vous. Mais en réalité, ça, du point de vue théorique, c'est quelque chose qui est très facile, mais dans la pratique, c'est très difficile. Et de ce point de vue, moi personnellement, quand je travaille avec des défenseurs des droits de l'homme qui se retrouvent dans une situation comme celle-là, je dis le contexte politique, le policy framework n'est plus suffisant. Il va falloir qu'on développe des approches intégrées avec vous-même pour pouvoir avoir une auto-évaluation des risques auxquels vous êtes confrontés et maintenant utiliser notre capacité en tant que bureau du système des Nations Unies pour faire pression sur les États et de faire en sorte que, évidemment, vous ne soyez pas confrontés encore à la persécution que vous fuyez de votre pays pour vous protéger. Actuellement, nous sommes dans une phase de réappropriation des modèles de protection qui concerne les défenseurs des droits de l'homme individuels et aussi les défenseurs des droits de l'homme collectifs. J'ai fait référence tout à l'heure au mouvement Gen Z qui, de plus en plus, exprime une colère légitime, une colère qui est assise sur trois choses la fragilité des modèles de gouvernance qu'il y a dans des États et qui ne prend pas en compte les besoins fondamentaux de cette génération-là. Ensuite, ce que j'appelle le manque profond de redevabilité. So, the necessity of accountability. Le manque profond de redevabilité que les jeunes et ce mouvement-là, ceux qui sont, je crois, les porteurs, remarquent au niveau de nos sociétés et pour lesquels ils rentrent vraiment dans les rues pour pouvoir demander quelque chose de fondamental. Et puis ensuite, la question de la participation. Tout ça rentre dans le cadre de ce que j'appelle l'écosystème de protection qui nous permettent non seulement de gérer les cas individuels comme les vôtres, mais aussi des cas collectifs. Mais jusque-là, je serai honnête avec vous, je ne sais pas si on a une baguette magique, non, on n'en a pas. Ça dépend des États, ça dépend aussi des gouvernements, ça dépend des mécanismes de protection que les défenseurs eux-mêmes utilisent pour s'autoprotéger et que nous, dans notre travail sur le renforcement de l'espace civique, eh bien, nous essayons de protéger et de renforcer. Il y a des interventions individuelles. Je ne veux pas inciter beaucoup là-dessus parce que ça fausse le débat. Les interventions individuelles, c'est-à-dire ce que le groupe de Hassan fait si brillamment, le concept de placement à travers les initiatives Ubuntu, où on identifie les besoins réels et on déplace les gens. Mais ça doit aller au-delà de ça. Quand il y a des risques individuels, il faut qu'on respecte, qu'on essaye d'effacer ces risques-là. Mais au-delà, il faut qu'on voit l'écosystème de façon un peu plus générale. Comment nous allons convaincre les gouvernements de savoir que celui qui fuit la persécution et qui se retrouve dans son pays à la recherche de cette protection puisse être effectivement protégé. C'est là le débat. C'est là le grand débat. Je ne sais pas si un jour on va régler cette problématique-là, mais c'est un travail qui est un travail de tous les jours auquel nous participons activement dans le développement des politiques de protection des États, des politiques de participation des États dans la mise en œuvre de leurs obligations internationales et régionales, mais aussi dans l'organisation des défenseurs des droits de l'homme eux-mêmes, dans la prise de conscience de leur propre protection. Et tout cela, je crois que c'est un processus qui prend beaucoup de temps, qui nécessite beaucoup de temps. Voilà.
Thank you.
Donc c'est un peu ça. Then I was almost done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So now let me turn to Gina. Time is against because we have to have another item for launching the report, which DefendDefenders have compiled 4 different corners of the continent, and also give you a minute of reflection of your concluding remark. So now let me turn to Gina, please.
Well, several things. I don't think I'll take them all because there are too many. Just a small comment about early warning. I echo what was said before, but then I keep asking myself why the early warning is always focused on the behavior of the people and not the prior the starting point from where they are coming. I mean, every time I talk with and this is something that has been happening recently to me, but I talk with some Gen Z actors. I see so much anger, but that anger is rooted in how they see the amount of indignity that their communities are living. There is a lot of fear because of the repression. There is also a lot of anger around corruption, around impunity, all the inequities, the stolen elections. So at the end, the warnings are already there, and they have been there for a very, very long time. So how is actually the systems are going to be taking and actually solving some of those problems to actually change the behavior of some of the people that they actually then portray as enemies is the real question. It's not about how people respond, it's why they are responding to such a range of horrible things that happen every day in our societies. I don't really have much time to go in depth on the question of the colleague from Somalia. I just want to do a reflection about, and then we need to go always to the basics. Human rights and freedoms are guaranteed to all of us because we are humans living in society. It doesn't matter if the country hasn't or has ratified a treaty. It doesn't matter if the country is
NTV, turning on your world.
That could have been bad.
Mountain Dew. Do the Dew.
Watch movies, catch up on the latest news, stream your favorite film and so much more every week for only 4,000 shillings with a 10 GB data bundle, plus all your local live TVs and radios as you rewind, record, pause and play again. Has power gone or you're traveling? No worries, the YoTV Channels app has got you sorted. And guess what? With our daily Jaribu,